It is late January 2026. And if you've been scrolling through your news feeds this week, you're probably feeling a mix of confusion and, frankly, a bit of dread.
Mm-hmm.
We have this one headline just screaming that President Trump is sending a huge fleet to the Middle East.
Right.
But then, if you look at the sidebar, the smaller print, you see these reports that the U.S. is pulling troops out of its biggest base in the region.
It's a classic case of mixed signals, isn't it?
Yeah.
On one hand, you have the loudest possible show of force.
Yeah.
On the other, you have what looks, at first glance, like a retreat.
Exactly. And that's what we need to figure out today. Because when you see headlines like total war and huge fleet, it feels like we're maybe 5 minutes to midnight. But are we?
Well, that's the big question.
We have a stack of sources here. We've got the president's comments from Air Force One on January 23rd, some aviation tracking data that tells a very, very specific story, and then some incredibly harsh statements coming out of Tehran.
And we also have the grim reality on the ground inside Iran, which I think is actually the engine that's driving all of this.
So the mission for this deep dive is to connect those dots. Why is the U.S. moving a floating city towards Iran while at the same time emptying out a base in Qatar? Is this just political theater, or are we actually witnessing the logistical setup for a major conflict?
To answer that, I think we have to ignore the noise for a second and just look at the map, because the movement of hardware, that tells the truth that politicians often won't.
Okay, so let's start there. The huge fleet. That's the president's quote. He was on Air Force One talking to reporters, and he said the U.S. is watching closely and that this fleet is moving just in case.
Just in case. That is a very heavy phrase when you're talking about nuclear-powered warships.
Right. And he admitted he had previously talked himself out of attacking Iran, but now the whole tone has shifted. So what is this huge fleet? Is this just a standard patrol, or is this something different?
Oh, it is definitely not a standard patrol. According to the reports and the tracking data we have, the centerpiece here is the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group.
Right.
Now, I want to pause on that because I think people hear Carrier Strike Group and just think big boat.
Yeah, it becomes a buzzword. It's just a phrase.
Right. But think about what the USS Abraham Lincoln actually is. It's 90 aircraft. It's F-35Cs. It's Super Hornets. It's surrounded by guided missile destroyers designed to shoot down literally anything in the sky.
Wow.
When you park that off a coastline, you aren't just parking a ship. You are parking a sovereign piece of American territory with more firepower than most countries' entire air forces.
So it's a siege weapon, basically.
Essentially.
Yeah.
But here's a detail that really, really matters. The tracking data in our sources flags something else.
Okay.
It's not just the fighters. There was a massive surge of support aircraft, specifically aerial refueling tankers.
Okay, I have to be honest. When I first read tankers, my eyes kind of glazed over. It sounds like logistics. The boring stuff. Why are you flagging that as the critical detail?
Because logistics is the difference between a parade and a war. Think about it.
Okay.
A fighter jet, even a super advanced one like an F-35, has a limit on how far it can fly, drop a payload, and come back.
Yeah.
It's on a leash.
Sure, makes sense.
When you flood the zone with aerial refueling tankers, those gas stations in the sky, you cut the leash. You are telling the adversary, my jets can take off from the ocean, fly deep into your territory, loiter there, strike multiple targets, and return safely. You don't bring in a surge of tankers for a photo op. You bring them in if you want to sustain an air campaign.
That's chilling. So the tankers basically transform the fleet from a defensive shield into an offensive sword.
That's the perfect way to put it. It signals range. It signals that nowhere is safe.
Okay, so we have the offensive sword moving into position, but this is where I get stuck. And I think a lot of our listeners are probably confused by this too. Just over a week before Trump announces this huge fleet, on January 14th, the U.S. orders a withdrawal of troops from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar.
The largest U.S. base in the Middle East.
Yeah.
A huge footprint.
Right. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, if you're gearing up for a fight, why would you leave your fortress? Doesn't that look like weakness, like we're packing up and going home right before the heat gets turned up?
It looks that way to the public, and honestly, it probably looks that way to some politicians. But strategically, it's the opposite of weakness. It's hardening.
Explain that, because it just sounds like a complete contradiction.
Think about the threat profile. If you get into a shooting war with Iran, a total war, as they are threatening, what is their first move?
Missiles.
They have a massive arsenal of ballistic missiles, and those missiles are pre-programmed with coordinates.
And Al Udeid is a fixed coordinate. It's on a map. It doesn't move.
Exactly. It's a sitting duck. It's a massive static target packed with American personnel and planes. By withdrawing troops from there and putting them on the USS Abraham Lincoln, you are taking your assets off the map. You are putting them on a moving platform that can travel 30 knots in any direction.
So it's a shell game. You're hiding the P.
It's survivability. You disperse your forces so they can't be wiped out in a first strike. So when I see withdrawal from Qatar paired with arrival of the Lincoln, I don't see a confused policy. I see a military clearing the decks for action. They're reducing their vulnerabilities.
That is a massive aha moment. It changes the whole narrative from the U.S. is leaving to the U.S. is crouching.
Crouching and ready to spring, yes.
Okay, so the chessboard is being set. We have the mobile fortress moving in, the static targets being emptied. But why now? Why January 2026?
Yeah.
We need to look at the other side of this equation. What is happening inside Iran?
This is the part of the story that often gets buried under the military headlines, but it's the spark. Iran is burning from the inside. The sources describe a country in total chaos.
The report mentions unrest, but that feels like a really mild word for what's actually happening.
It is. We are talking about massive protests driven by economic collapse. The currency is tanked. People can't afford food. And the regime's response has been absolutely brutal.
We have a number here from the official figures. 3,000 people dead.
Just pause on that number for a second. 3,000.
That's not a protest. That's a battlefield.
It is. And remember, these are the official figures acknowledged in the reports. The reality on the ground could be even worse. That tells you the regime is terrified. You don't kill 3,000 of your own citizens unless you feel your grip on power is slipping.
And this is where the narrative war kicks in, because Tehran isn't going on TV and saying, we are killing our people because they are hungry.
No, of course not. They're using a very specific word. They're calling the dead terrorists.
Terrorists.
The report says the Iranian government claims nearly 700 of those dead were terrorists backed by foreign powers. They're explicitly blaming the U.S. and its allies for infiltration.
Right.
They say outsiders are sending money, sending weapons, and giving orders to attack officials.
I see where this is going. If you label a protester a terrorist and say he's paid by America, then killing him isn't a crime, it's national defense.
Exactly. It gives them a legal and moral permission structure to use heavy weaponry. But it creates a very dangerous feedback loop.
How so?
Well, imagine you are the Iranian leadership. You are telling your people, the Americans are trying to overthrow us, and then suddenly a massive American fleet appears on the horizon.
It validates the lie. It makes their propaganda real.
It makes the propaganda look like truth. They can point to the USS Abraham Lincoln and say, see, we told you they were coming.
Yeah.
And that pushes them into a corner where they feel they have to lash out.
Which brings us to the threats. Because Tehran isn't just taking this lying down. The statements coming out of their officials are, well, they aren't diplomatic at all.
No, the source quotes a senior Iranian official warning of total war.
Total war. That's a phrase that keeps coming up. Do we know what they actually mean by that? Is it just bluster?
That's the scary part, the ambiguity. The official said they would view any attack as a violation of sovereignty and would respond in the toughest way possible. But they refuse to specify what that response looks like.
Does total war mean closing the Strait of Hormuz and cutting off the world's oil? Does it mean unleashing proxy groups all across the Middle East?
It could mean all of that. It implies no limits, no rules. It says, if you scratch us, we will try to burn down the whole house.
And yet, amidst all this shouting, there's this weird psychological game being played. I was reading the transcript of Trump's comments and then the Iranian comments, and it felt like I was watching two people pointing loaded guns at each other while screaming, I don't want to shoot.
That's the mirror image trap. It's a classic in international relations. Look at the U.S. side. Trump says he's sending the fleet just in case, and adds, perhaps we won't have to use it. He says he doesn't want to see anything happen.
And the Iranians say they are on high alert, but hope it's not for confrontation.
Both sides are terrified of the war starting, but both sides are taking steps that make that war more likely. It's the classic security dilemma. I buy a gun to be safe from you. You see my gun, so you buy a bigger gun to be safe from me. And suddenly we're both armed to the teeth and incredibly nervous.
So let's play this out for the listener. We have the hardware in place, the tankers, the carrier, we have the motivation, the internal collapse of Iran, we have the rhetoric, total war. What happens next?
This is where we have to talk about the concept of deterrence versus provocation. The U.S. strategy here is clearly meant to be deterrence. Park the fleet so close and make it look so scary that Iran stops blaming foreigners and just calms down.
But does that ever actually work?
It can, but it's incredibly high risk because when you pack that much military hardware into a confined space like the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Sea,
To create friction.
think about the daily interactions. Iranian speedboats buzzing U.S. ships.
Right.
U.S. drones flying near Iranian airspace, radar locks, interceptions,
All it takes is one 19-year-old sailor panicking on a machine gun.
or one pilot misinterpreting a signal, or a sea mine drifting into the path of a tanker. When tensions are this high, when the rhetoric is total war, the threshold for a mistake drops to zero. If a U.S. ship takes damage, even by accident, the political pressure on Trump to use that huge fleet becomes overwhelming.
And because of the logistics we already talked about, the tankers, the capability to retaliate instantly is already there. They don't have to wait for backup.
The gun is cocked.
Yeah.
The safety is off. They are just waiting for a reason to pull the trigger.
There's another angle here I want to touch on. The domestic politics. Trump admitted he persuaded himself not to attack before. He's vacillating. How does that unpredictability factor in?
It keeps Tehran guessing, which can be a
Mhm.
tactic. The madman theory, make your enemy think you're crazy enough to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it also confuses allies, and
Mhm.
it confuses the chain of command. If the military isn't sure what the president's red line actually is it a dead American? Is it a boat being harassed?
Yeah.
It leads to hesitation or overreaction.
And meanwhile, 3,000 people are dead in the streets of Iranian cities, and the regime is looking for a scapegoat.
That, to me, is the most dangerous variable of all. Regimes that are collapsing often start wars to survive. It rallies people to the flag. If the Ayatollahs feel they are about to be overthrown by their own people, starting a war with the great Satan might be their last desperate Hail Mary to stay in power.
So the fleet might not be a deterrent at all. It might be an invitation.
Precisely. It gives them the external enemy they desperately need right now.
It is a terrifying thought. We are watching a game of chicken played with nuclear carriers and ballistic missiles.
And the margin for error is razor thin.
So, to recap for everyone listening, because I know we've covered a lot of complex ground here.
Let's break it down.
Point 1. The huge fleet isn't just a show. The surge of aerial refueling tankers proves the U.S. is building the logistical backbone for sustained airstrikes. This is an offensive posture.
Point 2. The withdrawal from Qatar is not a retreat. It's a strategic dispersal. The U.S. is moving its pieces off the static board and onto the mobile board to survive a missile barrage.
Point 3. Iran is bleeding. 3,000 dead in protests. The regime is cornered and is actively blaming the U.S. for the chaos to justify its crackdown.
And point 4. Both sides are threatening total war while hoping the other side blinks first.
It really makes you wonder about the nature of peace through strength. We always hear that having a big stick keeps the peace. But sometimes bringing the big stick into the room just makes everyone else grab their knives.
It does. And I'll leave you with this one thought. We often treat these geopolitical events like they are precise chess moves made by rational masters.
Right.
But history tells us that war is usually a series of blunders, miscalculations, and emotions spiraling out of control. We have all the ingredients for a blunder right here.
And we will be watching closely to see what happens next. Hopefully cool heads prevail, but looking at the source stack today, the temperature is just rising so fast.
Indeed. It's a moment to pay attention.
Well, that is a heavy note to end on, but that is the reality of the deep dive. We peel back the layers, even when what we find is unsettling. Thank you for listening. Keep your eyes on the news, stay safe, and we will catch you on the next one.